We're just gonna give it a few seconds for people to be able to join. Thank you for being here on time.
Oh, shoot, what happened?
Okay, it's 7 o'clock. We wanted to start on time just so we have a good conversation ahead. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Showing up to a conversation like this speaks to your care, to your community, and for yourself. Allow me to just quickly introduce myself. My name is Happy Reyno. I am the Executive Director of BC Bereavement Helpline. I would like to thank everyone for joining us tonight. If you're joining us for the first time, I just wanted to introduce our organization. Peace Bereavement Helpline is a province-wide nonprofit. We provide support for anyone going through grief and loss. We have our free helpline, support groups, and bespoke training and public webinars such as this. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the tragedy in the Tumbler Ridge, and that's the reason why we're here tonight. We wanted to thank you and give our gratitude to all of our first responders during these times of tragedy, police, paramedics, teachers, counselors, nurses, and citizens, and just everyone who showed up to the Tumbler Ridge community. We are holding our hearts in the victims, the families, friends, and everyone feeling the ripple effect of this loss. We know that grief can show up in many ways: intense, confusing, delayed, numb, and all of these responses we know are normal. So I would like to invite you all to just take a quiet moment together in honor of all the victims of the Tumbler Ridge tragedy. Thank you. I would like to acknowledge that BC Bereavement Helpline is located in the New Westminster on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Kikite First Nation. We recognize their enduring connection to this land and honor their ongoing presence and strength as we gather virtually this evening. Please join us in the chat to acknowledge the Indigenous lands each of you are joining us from. Tonight's webinar is made possible through the support of Community Action Initiative, or CAI. And I wanted to sincerely thank Savi Swain and Julia Kesla, their executive director, who proactively reached out to BC Bereavement Helpline to ensure that support was available quickly. We're very grateful to both of you if you're here. And thank you so much for your leadership. It is truly something that matters in moments like this. I would like to let everybody know just before we start that our helpline has dedicated hours of support for those impacted by the tragedy. So it is open until 9 p.m. tonight and also tomorrow, Saturday, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So if at any point that tonight feels heavy for you, please do reach out to us. Know that you don't have to navigate this alone. And since we are going to be talking about sensitive topic, just a few gentle notes before we begin. This conversation may bring up strong emotions for any one of us. So if you need to take time and step away, please do that at any time that you feel like doing so. This session is being recorded, so feel free to keep your camera off for your privacy as well as you like. And we kindly ask everyone to engage with kindness, respect, recognizing that people may be carrying different kinds of loss. Please do take care of yourselves. Grab your water, tea, tissues, or anything that helps you feel grounded. We'll open the floor for questions at the end as time permits, and you're welcome to add questions in the chat during the session. We'll also be sharing a short feedback afterwards. So please join us, especially if you are joining us from Tumbler Ridge community. There's one question that we wanted to ask you about the additional support, resources, or guidance that would be most valuable to your community at this time following this webinar. So your feedback will guide us how we can continue to show up for you. And now I would like to introduce our speaker. So it is my privilege to introduce our wonderful speaker, John Dubé. John is a registered social worker and a registered clinical counselor in the province of British Columbia. He began his work in the area of suicide and bereavement in 1985, responding to family and community needs to a suicide, homicide, or traumatic death. Over the past 25 years, John has conducted numerous workshops and trainings to professionals, therapists, counselors, teachers, social workers, to name a few, on topics of grief and traumatic and complex bereavement losses, as well as issues about homicide, suicide, and multiple loss. I'm very grateful that he's here with us tonight. And everyone, if you're ready for John, give me a thumbs up. That's good. All right, John, over to you then.
Um, Let me just, okay. Good evening. To begin, this is a very, let me just take this off for a minute. So I just want to welcome everybody. Um, this is a very tragic time, and I want to be really sensitive to all the folks who are attending. I am in gratitude that you have taken your Friday evening to come and join a community of people who are of concern and interest. And so so welcome. I'm going to share my PowerPoint, so I'm going to just walk us through the information that I would like to share. At the end, there will be an opportunity for question and answer, but at the same time, you can put some information or questions in the chat, and Happy will be monitoring that as well. So what I would like to cover today is to talk about grief. So we're going to do some definitions so we all come onto the same page. We're going to talk about elements of personal grief. We'll talk about family grief, and we'll talk about community grief. But today, what I would like to, as we're talking at each level, personal, family, friends, and community, recognize that as the information is coming up onto the screen, it can be related to any of those areas. So I really want to emphasize the interconnectedness of our personal experience and our family experience and our community experience. And of course, as we've talked before, and it's really important when we're working in this area of death, that we be kind and gentle, not only to others, but to ourselves as well. And Happy talked a little bit about triggers, so this information can be quite sensitive, and really want to invite folks to take care of themselves and to take a moment right now and to think about if I'm feeling really impacted by what is being shared. What would I need to do? Do I need to take a sip of water? Do I need to step back for a minute? Do I need to close my eyes and take a couple of breaths? So just take a moment and think about how am I going to take care of myself this evening? So what we're going to do is we're going to go through some definitions, and we're going to talk about what loss is. So loss is an intentional or unintentional separating from someone or something of value. So what can happen here is we can choose to experience loss by moving to a new place. And if someone dies and passes away, that's an unintentional separation as well. So loss is that separation of someone or something that we value. The term bereavement is really about the whole experience of loss. So it's a holistic experience impacting your emotions, your physical self, your mental self, spiritual self, and relational, the social connections that we have with each other. So bereavement is the state of being in a loss. For me, the grief component is the emotional component of our state of bereavement. It's oftentimes the word that is most often used, and it's the descriptor of our often visible reactions to a perceived or actual loss. And mourning involves the social, public, and external expressions of grief. So the things that we do that lets other folks know that we are grieving. So grief is what goes on the inside, and mourning is what goes on the outside. Complex bereavement, which is what is folks are experiencing in any community that has had a tragedy, involves an unusual intensity and duration and persists the reactions of the loss that really can interfere the daily functioning of folks. So complex bereavement is really intense, long lasting, and definitely impacts the daily functioning of folks for some time. Community grief involves a significant loss that impacts a group or community with who share emotional, physical, mental, relational, and spiritual responses that affects them both at a personal level and at a collective level. And disenfranchised grief, I thought would be important because it's where we cannot express or feel like we don't have the right to feel bereaved. So it's disenfranchised grief is when society tells us not to grieve at the extent that we would like to, or that feels that we need to. So, what's important in disenfranchised grief is to really follow your heart and to really follow what is it that you need in the face of this significant loss. When we're talking about grief, we're talking about three burdens of grief. So, the first burden, which is the primary loss. So, the primary loss could be an individual or a sense of security in light of a tragic situation like what happened in Tumbler Ridge. So a primary loss is the main loss and separation of something and someone in our lives. That's the first burden of grief. The second burden of grief is us, we who are the bereaved. We are forever changed. And so that's a second burden of grief. Primary grief is the person that we have lost. And then how we are forever changed is the second burden of grief. And the third burden of grief is helping or working or hearing what other people tell us, how our social interactions are happening or not happening. Some folks tend to withdraw from us. Some folks get really super close. Some people tell us how we should feel or how we should not feel. And so the third burden is how people are supporting us and how people are not supporting us in a way that helps us through our grief. Grief is a cycle, ongoing, and it can last for a very, very long time. In this, you can see that there are a number of feelings such as shock and denial, despair and depressive symptoms, acute grief, um, and there's a whole range of other emotions that are within this cycle. And the cycle is not closed, nor is it in stages. What I like to call these are aspects of our grief as we go through the separation of our person or the person that we are missing or lost. So this is an ongoing situation that happens over months, weeks, months, and years. What's really important to know is that our grief can be seen at an individual level, grief can be seen at a family level, and grief can be seen at a community level. So as I'm going through the more specific details of individual, family, and community, they can be interchanged, they can be shared and transposed one into the other. So for individuals experiencing grief, we all need to be kind and gentle. And so the impact of grief, what happens for folks is that they may begin to experience difficulty making decisions. So what happens, there is confusion and sometimes there's inability to concentrate. So what happens is folks in a course of a conversation may lose track of what they're saying, or they just are feeling so overwhelmed that they don't know how to make decisions or what decisions need to be made. There are memory gaps. So for folks, they may not remember what folks have been told or have said to them. There could be memory gaps around who was at the funeral or who was at the celebration of life or who was at a memorial service. And so memory may not always be clear in grief periods. We sometimes see a lack of motivation. So some folks just want to be home and hibernate and be them by themselves. There's higher rate of job absenteeism. Sometimes there's an increase in people being accident prone or that they're sick. And sometimes people struggle with their sense of spirituality and they struggle with how to be connected or could happen the opposite. There's a strengthening of their connection to that which is bigger than ourselves. For some people, there's a preoccupation with their health and their concerns about are they getting an illness or are they okay? And so there's some preoccupation with that. There are also physical symptoms. We can see eating and sleeping patterns are changing. So for some folks, they sleep more or sleep less or can't sleep because their mind is going over and over and over again. So we see those symptoms. We also see people with aches and pains. So going back to the physical symptoms, particularly at the beginning of the tragedy, at the beginning of the loss, I always let people know that at the beginning, their body temperature, their core body temperature will drop. And so they'll be more cold. So it's important for folks to drink warm liquid like tea or coffee. If you're struggling with eating and not wanting to eat, then I make recommendations around eating smaller pieces of meals instead of a big meal. Eat maybe 6 or 7 times during the day. If you're really not sleeping, then it's napping as you can. So when the impact of loss is happening, it's really important to just take care of yourself, try to eat, try to sleep, try to make sure that you get out and exercise, and really be mindful of how you're doing. There is a lot of up and down of emotions. So one moment you'll be crying, another moment you may be really angry, another moment you may feel really numb. And those ups and downs emotions is really a part of the grieving process. The other important thing to consider when we're looking at grief and loss and bereavement is that everybody will travel that journey uniquely. And so there really is no judgment. How I'm going to respond to grief will be very different than other people. And so, again, allow folks to be where they need to be and to support them where they are. And I know that I keep repeating this, but I, when the folks that I work with, I always say to them, be kind to yourself and be gentle to yourself. Um, this is grief takes great work, hard work, and it's important that we be gentle with ourselves as we process this extraordinary pain and life-changing situation. Family grief. Family grief is a relational process. The experience, the loss happens in a shared experience. So what ends up by happening is each person's grief begins to influence and lean in on each other. So how the parents grieve, how the children grieve, how teens grieve, how siblings will grieve, will lean in on each other and will impact each other. And so in family grief, it's not just the individual that we're watching, but we're looking at the entire family and how it's working, how it's interacting, how a sibling handles the loss is going to be very different than another sibling. Um, Patterns of interaction and how we communicate with each other is all interconnected and a push and a pull. There are many occasions where one family member may suppress their grief process because they believe that their grief is not as important as somebody else's and that they need to stand back a bit. So it's really important in family grief to recognize that members of family interact with each other. The other thing I want to add to this is friends. Friends also impact how we grieve each other. The closer that we are as friends, we begin to exhibit very similar things like a family would. So, how our friends grieve impacts us and affects us as to how we express, how we feel internally. Um, so grief is not just, it is an individual thing, but it impacts other people a lot. So, family grief is a dynamic process. It really looks at the interconnectedness, the relationship, our interdependence, role reorganization. So, what could happen is one of the siblings could become more active, more of a caretaker than another. Um, Situations around if a parent has passed or has died, then a child may take partially those roles. So when somebody dies in the family, there's a reorganization of roles and communication pattern changes. So we need to be very mindful that how we used to communicate before the loss, before the death, the pattern may change. And again, so there's this adjusting, there's this second burden of grief where how folks interact will change. Another important component when we're looking at family grief is who has died, who has passed away, and the relationships of the survivors. So, and so people will make different meanings of the relationship with their person. Um, and so they'll have a shared understanding, but they may have a very divergent meaning of the relationship because it means different things to different people. Developmental impact with family grief is important to know because children will grieve very differently than adolescents, and young adults will grieve very differently than adults. So we have to consider developmental impact of the loss on the family structure. For example, a 5-year-old may not necessarily understand that a death has happened, and so will come in and cry on their parents or their caregivers' shoulder, and then be the next minute be playing and laughing with their toys. So which is really common and very normal for 5-year-olds. So one of the things in family grief we need to keep in mind is that the development where folks are in their developmental time is going to impact their grief process. And again, every individual will experience the grief differently, and that communication is key. Um, Remember not to fall into the trap of reading each other's mind. It's really important to open up a conversation and allow folks to share what's really happening for themselves. When we're looking at a community loss, like Tumbler Ridge, or like what happened in Montreal, or Toronto, or Tabor, or a whole bunch of other communities, what I have observed is the family of the folks who have died. Um, it takes work to reclaim their loss away from the public eye. Because when a tragedy happens in the community, the media take over, there's a police investigation, politicians may become involved. And so over time, that fades, and the family is left where they need to reclaim their grief, reclaim their grieving process. And so that takes time and space. So it's really important that in community that we support one another and that we support families through this hard time. So we talked about individual grief, we talked about family grief, now we're going to talk about community grief. Community grief is around significant loss, and sometimes a significant loss may be just one person who has played a role in the community and has impacted an entire community. Significant loss could be multiple folks as well. In a community, there is a shared experience of the impact on emotionally, physical, mental, relational, and spiritual responses. You can feel in a community the impact as a unit, as a whole, as an interconnectedness. It is both personal and collective. And because it's a shared experience, we need to be aware that um, how I'm dealing with it as an individual can echo into the community as well. And so the shared that energy that we all hold is shared in throughout the entire community. And the smaller the community, the more impactful that sharing begins to happen. In community grief, oftentimes there are collective mourning rituals, getting together. There is usually a place where people will bring flowers and cards and candles. That's a collective mourning ritual. There is the memorial services that happen. So, and that collective mourning rituals are very, very important to support and to participate in. Talked a little bit about this before, where there's an emotional rippling effect that happens. Whenever there's a major tragedy in a community, it really significantly reduces the sense of safety. So that needs to be addressed in several ways, which we'll talk about later in a couple more slides. But it's important to know that when a tragedy happens, the safety fabric of the community, it frays on the edges. And so it's really important to look at how can we develop strategies to increase a sense of safety within the community? What can we do to make people feel connected with each other, bonded with each other, so that they're not alone? And it may be sharing overnight stays so that people are feeling not alone and feeling safer in their own home environment. So the sense of safety really needs to be built, rebuilt. There also needs to be recognition, and this happens all over the place, is when there's a significant loss or death in a community, there's a sense of ownership by everybody. And that sense of ownership becomes that shared rippling of emotion. We are all impacted by this loss, by this tragedy. And yeah, we all have that sense of ownership. And when there's a community loss, tragedy, uh, the impact is long term. I just spoke to um, an individual a couple of days ago. She was a survivor of a school as well, school tragedy 50 years ago. And so what happened in Tumbler Ridge brought many impactful emotions back up for this person. And so this is a long-term impact. We need to really be mindful of that. We need to continually be on top of that, take care of ourselves about that. Look at collective rituals on a yearly basis, if that's possible. And I think there needs to be some recognition that folks are not just going to get over this. This this is going to be an impactful situation, changing all of our lives and ways that we don't really know yet and slowly unfolds over time. What do you do? What can we all do? I'm going to go through possible responses, and then I want to open it up and have folks share what kinds of things that they have found worked and how they have found it helpful. So let me go through these possible responses, and then I'm going to invite folks to share as well. Number one, the most important thing is to simply be there for each other. Sounds straightforward, sounds like it's a no-brainer, and so critically important and foundational. Although we are all impacted by the tragedy, by the deaths, we all need to take a turn in being active listeners. That means we need to take an opportunity to step back and allow somebody to tell us their pain story. And then we need to be able to create a space for us to tell our own pain story. So it's important that we all be active listeners in reaction and in response to a loss. It's important to use the name of the people who have died. It's so critical. There are continuing bonds that we have with folks. We continue a relationship with them, mostly in our hearts and in our minds and in our thoughts. In talking about the tragedy and talking about the death, we are not creating more pain for the person or for ourselves. What we're doing is we are remembering. We are keeping the memory alive. It's important to acknowledge the tragedy and also remember our own internal reactions and responses to grief. So, as an active listener, I'm going to listen to your pain story and I'm going to be mindful about what goes on inside me as well, although I'm going to be focused on the person who's in front of me. It's also important to be there for other people, and it's also really important to be there for yourself. So it's important to remember you, that you've been impacted by the loss, by the tragedy, and what kinds of things are you doing for yourself? Take care of yourself. So physically, are you eating okay? Are you trying to sleep or take naps as much as possible? Are you able to express emotionally what's going on for you? Your anger, your despair, your regrets, all of those emotions can be shared with people who are safe. Spiritually, it's important to look at how you are a part of a bigger thing. Mentally, what kinds of things can you learn to help you understand and give language to what you're experiencing? And relationally, how can you be interdependent and lean on other people and let people lean in on you as well? So it's really important that you think about all of those five areas. How am I taking care of myself mentally? How am I taking care of myself emotionally and spiritually? So it's really important to reflect that. And when you're the active listener, you could explore those five elements to the person who's telling you their pain story. And always remember that we are unique, that although this is a collective experience, We still are individuals in how we react and how we work towards integration of that experience. Going through grief is about being uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable place to be. And also an indication that you're grieving, that you're working very hard at trying to make some sense of this tragedy, of this unbelievable, incomprehensible event that happened. Um, so there's a lot of discomfort, and it's okay to be discomfort. It helps us move. And in the grieving process, expect the unexpected. We never know the twists and turns of grief. We don't know how other people will react to our grieving process, and we need to be gentle and kind as we react and respond to other people's grieving process. And if it's too much for folks, really would like to invite folks to seek professional help how and when is appropriate. And it's really important to not pretend that everything okay because things are not okay. And that's really important to recognize with that. And in all things, develop kindness responses and being gentle and let people know that you see them, that you hear them, that you acknowledge their grief and their brokenness. It's really super important. And also know that in grief, we are forever changed. And so there's this rippling effect that goes on and on. There are moments where we will feel that it's overwhelming and that we're drowning in our grief. And then there will be moments where we can actually take a breath. One of the things that I oftentimes share with people is the first thing that we do when we are born is we take a breath, we breathe in, and in taking that breath, we recognize that we are alive, that we are an individual. And then when we come to the end, when we die, the last thing that we give up is our breath. And those of us who are left behind are so bonded to this person who has passed that we also give up our breath because we want to be where they are. And it's so important to recognize and remember that we still have breath. Although that breath is very painful, we still need to relearn how to breathe and to be connected to ourself. And that takes time. Thank you for listening. We're open to questions or comments.
Thank you, John. You're all welcome to raise your hand using the raise hand button at the bottom of the Zoom. Otherwise, you can also share them in the chat.
Happy. There's a question around resources. Can we share resources or direct? Can you do a link to the BCBH website into the chat?
Yes, I can do that.
How do we avoid pathologizing grief? Grief, I would say, is a natural and very painful process of our humanity. And I I've worked in this area for many years, and I see grief as very cutting to the bone and really works with people resetting their priorities. What is really important in life? And the folks that I've worked with have taught me over and over again that it's important to be kind, it's important to be connected, it's important to let people know how you really feel in kindness to them. Um, and I can't see how people can pathologize that when it's our common humanity that makes it so in so I think we need each other in order for us to endure the pain of this grief. We need each other. Yes, yeah. It's important to have information um, in order to give you language and so that you can share the language with folks around if you're feeling really disconnected or you're feeling like you're brain fogged or if you're feeling like you just don't want to eat or you feel like you're really numb and then you hear, that's really okay. It's okay because you're in a grief. And to know that you're exhausted. Yes, grief is hard work. Takes a lot and lot of energy. A lot of energy. Comment on the role of social media. Okay, so I'm going to be honest. Um, I've worked with a number of homicide situations and suicide situations in community, and when I am when I'm honored to be in to be part of that family, I don't look at the news. I don't look at social media. Because the reality for me, my experience is that the media is not truthful. And the real story, the real pain belongs to the family. So in order to honor my families that I've worked with, I don't do social media. I've worked really hard with the social media a number of years ago, um, to not be so dramatic in their reporting, but to be more human and more respectful for family. But social media can definitely be increase the pain thermometer for families, for communities, for individuals. Absolutely. Yeah. Any other questions? Heather.
Cherry had a hand up before me. I just,
Oh, oh, hi,
I think
Sherry. Sorry.
no worries at all. I wrote it in the comments in the chat anyway. For myself personally, I find writing, whether it's journalizing, scribbling, doodling, drawing, poetry, writing is something that can take it out of my physical body and out of my mind and put it on paper. And it seems to help with the trauma. And that reaching out and having company, I found through grief, eating, like just eating. I wasn't eating alone, but
Yes.
having that company and that extra person to lift me up, it was easier for me to eat.
Yeah, like I would like to add, Sherry, because you're totally right. Writing is very helpful. I was working with a person the other day, and she felt that she needed to be alone when she was having her supper at night. And I said to her, "Why? Like, if you're needing to be with somebody, be with somebody." And she
Yeah.
thought it was the expectation to do that. And I said to her, no, do what you need to do. If you need to be with somebody, be with somebody. It's so important. So important.
And with something so impactful, like it is so hard to try, like to even like to muster a word to what you I can even possibly say. So I wrote a little poem and I left it as well in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
I'm with you all the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Heather and then Sarah.
Thank you very much. What you've said has been very clear and really informative. I find also, I want to just address the traumatic grief events that are community events. And and I noticed that when we're dealing with the trauma and the grief, and they're often different. The trauma creates a lot of what you've said, in terms of dissonance and confusion and so on. And we're not really feeling our grief immediately. And I find that we're often disembodied. That we talk about the event and we try and figure the event out and wonder what would have happened if, this hadn't happened and so on. And there's a place for that. But it also is very exhausting and
Yeah.
doesn't really bring us into our bodies, which for me is where the grief lives. And I was thinking about how useful nature is. Being outside and feeling my feet on against the ground, or feeling trees around me and so on. It seems to be a sort of it's part of the community support. It's like the environmental
Mhm.
support feels, it just grounds us a little bit,
Yeah.
as we're going through it. So for me, when it's sort of like gossip in a way, when there's a lot of gossip going on, it keeps us out of our bodies. And sometimes I find that I have to withdraw from it, particularly in situations of, traumatic situations. Not to withdraw from the people, but just to sort of find my own space to feel my body before I even enter with others, because like you've said so many times during this presentation, which has been really helpful, is that the kindness to ourselves really has to happen. We have to keep coming back to that, so that in fact I bring some of that back when I re-enter with other people.
hmm hmm Yeah. Well put. Yeah. And talking about a variety of different strategies around responding to the trauma and responding to the grief as well.
Mm.
Going out to nature, taking a moment for yourself, and all of those things become really important. Thank
Yep.
you. Thanks, Heather.
Mhm.
Sarah.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I also wanted to second what Sherry and Heather said about writing and walking and how it can be like such a balm and so healing. Even getting out for like a 15-minute walk is so healing. But John, I wanted to thank you for bringing up the aspect about deep listening. And I feel like I was wondering if you could expand on that because I think that actually, like true deep listening is such a skill that we we actually don't really know how to listen to people because a lot of the time we want to jump in with advice. We want to jump in to fix because it's so hard to be present and be a container for people's pain because we want to be able to make them feel better,
Mhm.
right? But can you speak a little bit to um,
How to do deep
yeah,
listening?
the skills involved in
Yeah.
actual true deep listening. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will try. I'm not sure if I'll be successful, but I will try. For me, when I describe being an active listener, um, it takes, I believe that it takes great courage to be a deep listener. And the courage comes from having to set aside your own story. That takes great courage to set aside your own story and to say to the person in front of you, I'm here. I see you. I hear you. I acknowledge you. And what's happening for me on the inside is not as important as you are who is in front of me. So it takes great courage to set aside your story. And then as you're listening, you're being curious. What is this person really telling me? Oh, that's their story. That's the depth of their pain. How can I let them know that I hear that pain? Right? So that sense of setting the courage to set aside your story, a lot of curiosity around asking the person to tell the story, and respect. Be respectful of the person's story. Don't comment on good, bad, or whatever. Their story is their story. And it is their story. It's part of who they are. And they own it. They are responsible for it. And that's who they are. And for us, it also takes great respect for us to honor in hearing that and not tell other people, not go and put it on social media, but to honor that moment of vulnerability. I love Brene Brown. She talks about vulnerability around being vulnerable to those who have earned the right to hear our story. So when we have somebody coming to us and they want to tell their story, their pain story to us, we need to be confidential about it. We need to be respectful about it. And we need to be courageous about it. Um, does that make sense, Sarah?
Yes, it does. It does. Yeah. That's great. Yet setting aside our own story. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes you can even say to people, I don't know what to say, but thank you, like for sharing with me, because I think there's just such that drive to like we want to fix it. We want to
Yeah.
give them advice, but just yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Thank
there's
you.
nothing to fix, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I cannot take away the pain of a mother who's lost a child. I can hear it, see it, acknowledge it, but I can't take it away.
Thank you.
You, John. There's so many engaging topic that people are bringing up in the chat, but conscious of the time, I think we can take one more question for you, John. There's a question from Amanda that I shared with you in the chat. So I can read it. Many people experience what's called disenfranchised grief. Grief
Yes.
that isn't acknowledged, validated, or supported by society, friends, or family. In the context of grieving in community, what would you say to those who are mourning a loved one whose loss is stigmatized, where their pain is real but often unseen, dismissed, or even judged by those around them?
Yeah, that's why I purposely included disenfranchised grief as one of the terms to talk about. The important thing is to find somebody who will honor you, who will honor your pain. Um, and so that may take a bit of work. That may be the BC Bereavement Helpline. That may be your neighbor down the street. Know that you have a right to your story and to share your story to people who will honor you and respect you and not hurt you, right? So not everybody owns your story, you own your story. And it's to find somebody who can hear it and honor you about that. Disenfranchised grief happens all over the place. It is a very painful experience to not be recognized or to have the loss marginalized. So it's really important to know that your experience of loss is your right to feel that loss at whatever level and whatever depth that is important to you, right? So I hope that answers the question. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much. For folks who has not checked the chat, I shared a bunch of resources for you. I'll probably can include them in the post webinar survey as well. Also, you can reach out to our website if you need any resources for yourself or for anyone else. Again, we are going to be open tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I would like to thank everyone who joined us today. Appreciate your time. We're at time, and if you could share a minute or two to share your feedback with us. I shared the link in our chat as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, John, for your time as well.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.